Today on Locked On Rockies, we begin our reviewing the Rockies series with a look at arguably one of the most important vets on the roster, Kris Bryant. 2024 is a key year for him. Is he going to finally have his Rockies moment?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 23rd day of October in the year 2023. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot. That's what we do around here each and every day, is bring you your daily Colorado Rockies talk on your favorite streaming service and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show by letting us know what you think about the Rockies. What are your Rockies hot takes? What's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies? Check us out there. Check us out on your favorite streaming services. And thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We really appreciate it. And we really appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and joining us here every day. We are beginning our Reviewing the Rockies series here, where we're going to take a look at Rockies players, mostly starters, mostly players that spent a considerable amount of time here playing for the Rockies or play a significant role for the Rockies in the case of our starting point here. And I think Kris Bryant is the place to start here as we talk about the Rockies going through the offseason and as we're reviewing players. And unfortunately for Kris Bryant and in his time with the Rockies, the review is still mostly negative. Before we dive into everything today, I want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey, also, I'm Locked On Rockies host Paul Holden. I am your Rockies fan extraordinaire. I have been bringing you your daily Rockies talk here on the Locked On Rockies podcast for about 3 seasons now, and been following this team my entire life. So thank you for tuning in, like I said. And man, this is a conversation that's going to be familiar, but it's a conversation that is, again, one of the most important ones. This is easily, without the doubt, the most important moment offseason of Kris Bryant's Rockies career, because the crossroads are here. We're going to hit the halfway point, and we're already 2 seasons into the mega contract, and Kris Bryant doesn't have 500 at-bats in a game yet. He is 40 at-bats short in a game in a season for the Rockies. Kris Bryant has 460 at-bats for the Rockies over 2 seasons. This is the first time in his career that he has finished with back-to-back seasons with this low of numbers, not including the pandemic season. 2018, he had 389 at-bats. And at-bats are an important stat when we're looking at Kris Bryant, because he simply needs to be in the game more. We can't even get the best understanding. We can't even understand the true impact of Kris Bryant because we've seen so little of Kris Bryant over 2 years. I mean, and the amount of what can it mean? I mean, are we going to see a resurgence in the power? Will a full season of Coors Field really benefit Kris Bryant? I really want to know how it feels for him to navigate and go through these seasons. I know that we've heard some stuff. I know he's a leader in the clubhouse. I know him and Nolan Jones had a good relationship and they were doing things, but this is a kind of make or break point for Kris Bryant as a member of the Rockies. He needs to start reflecting this contract. He needs to figure out ways to keep himself healthy, ways to maneuver and change whatever he's doing with his body and things to get back in healthy shape. And if that's the move to first base, then that's fine. I think that's going to be when we're looking and thinking about Kris Bryant's health in 2024, the move to first base should help Kris Bryant. But the move to right field was supposed to help Kris Bryant stay healthy. Putting him in as a DH and things of that nature was supposed to help with the health of Kris Bryant. While I have question marks about a lot of Kris Bryant's game, the biggest question mark still remains his health. Not even 500 at-bats in 2 seasons? That's a massive problem, and a massive problem for the Rockies as they navigate the back end of this contract and navigate the second half of this contract, because this season, or this upcoming season, will start off on the right foot, and the momentum will start to build if Kris Bryant is in the lineup more consistently and Kris Bryant is playing a contributing role on this team. At moments in his time with the Rockies, he has been a contributor. But there was a good point brought up here in Purple Rose ranking the Rockies here, and Kris Bryant comes in at number 52 on the Rockies ranking here for Purple Row. And this is from Mac Wilcox over here. Kris Bryant's contract is officially an albatross. One thing that could be said for Bryant last season was he was effective when he did play, but that wasn't necessarily true in 2023. And I'm reading here again from Mac Wilcox here on Purple Row. His slash line last season finished at 306, 376, and this is 2022, mind you, at 306, 376, 475. A line that Rockies fans could be optimistic about heading into this year. Sadly, even though KB had more playing time, he saw that same line diminish to 239, 318, 375. If last season's quiet debut was cause for concern, I don't blame some fans for feeling panic after the 2023 campaign. That's a significant drop-off. A significant drop-off of what is that? Nearly 70 points on batting average, nearly 60 points there in an OP. I think that's, what is that, on OBP, and then 100-point dip of 375. I just want to make sure in slugging. So my biggest concern, especially with Kris Bryant, on top of the health concern, that power dip, 100-point dip in that slugging, that's a significant problem. That's a huge issue for the Rockies. He needs to be someone that hits 20 home runs for them. He has hit 20 home runs more often than not in his career, including in 2015, and he's had multiple 30-year home runs. But if the Rockies can get Kris Bryant to be hitting a 20 home runs again, which we can't necessarily sit there and count on at this stage, that's a huge boost for the Rockies, on top of his ability, at least what we've seen in that first season, his ability to lash out some singles and get on base and do things that way. My other big concern, in addition to the dip in power, he still strikes out a lot, and he doesn't really help himself out, and that doesn't help the Rockies out at all. This is a team that simply cannot afford to continue to strike out in abundance. 68 strikeouts there in those 300 at bats, 68 strikeouts to only 29 walks. The RB, I know everything was important in context, and maybe that 68's a little watered down. I just don't like the strikeout rate, including 3 strikeout. To look at his last few games, 3 strikeout game against the Dodgers, 2 strikeout game against Minnesota, strikeout against Minnesota in the game previous to that. 31 strikeouts in 30 games. That's a strikeout a game over his final 30 games of the season. And for Kris Bryant, that's simply unacceptable. And it's simply unacceptable for that to be the mantra for the Rockies. Kris Bryant is one of many Rockies players that need to cut back on strikeouts, but we are seeing Kris Bryant's health regress. We're seeing Kris Bryant's offense regress. And now we're putting him in a spot where he has to relearn a defensive position. And really, the Rockies have to stash him at first base as kind of a way to get him on the field and hide him and make sure that his health is okay. So can we hope that a full healthy season for Kris Bryant changes this up? Well, we'll have to think about that, and let's talk about it coming up in segment number 2 here on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. But before we do that, got to tell you about the title sponsor of the show today, and that is Gametime. Gametime, Gametime, I've used Gametime twice now, and both times Gametime has come up clutch. Gametime's gotten me to the All-Star game this year and got me into one of my biggest concert events of the year when I went and saw the Postal Service. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They got last-minute tickets and all sorts of deals throughout the day and flash deals right up to the show, so you can get all sorts of money-saving opportunities. And one of my favorite parts about Gametime is you get an image of your seat before you buy. That's right. You know where you're going to sit when you buy your last-minute tickets with Gametime, and that just takes one more stress off your shoulder and adds to that peace of mind. Buy the tickets in 2 seconds with 2 taps, and Gametime has deals on those tickets right up to the start of the event. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and use a code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast for free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, you're in the right spot. That's what we do. Thank you for finding us on your favorite streaming service. Thank you for finding us on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where your subscription is the easiest way to help the show and the best way to beef up the show as well. It's really big. It's really big help. I promise you. It might seem like a small thing, but when you subscribe to Locked On Rockies on YouTube, it is a massive, massive help for me and for the show. So thank you for checking us out, and thank you for checking us out there. We're reviewing Kris Bryant, and I mean, I think the WAR and Purple Rose ranking is nailed it again. I think when you're ranking or looking at Kris Bryant or grading Kris Bryant, I kind of like to do the review. I don't necessarily want to put some arbitrary number or score. I like Purple Rose ranking is literally just WAR, so that's how the ranking is. We got the inside scoop if you missed out on one of our crossover episodes there with Evan and Skylar, how they do the rankings over there at Purple Rose. So that's the way. That's a great way to handle it there. So I don't want to necessarily just apply a random thing, but in the spirit of entertaining podcasting thing, I really don't think you can give Kris Bryant anything but an F for this year. And really an F overall for his Rockies tenure. And the biggest thing that's been a bummer about Kris Bryant, on top of the obvious, I am not seeing a confident, clutch MVP player. I don't really feel like Kris Bryant in his time in purple has ever really made me feel an abundance in confidence that he is the one that's going to do the damage. He is the MVP guy. I am fully prepared that Kris Bryant is going to have the big moment. And he had some big opportunities. I mean, late in games against the Cubs, all sorts of moments. And like we were talking about before, that ended in strikeouts, that ended in roll me over, weak contact outs. Kris Bryant needs to have not only a signature Rockies moment, but multiple. And if Kris Bryant is going to change the overall narrative of his time as a member of the Colorado Rockies, it's going to come by building key moments and helping the Rockies build up momentum throughout the season and break up the tough stretches, be the veteran presence that helps pick up the young team when they need him, in order to build something special. If Kris Bryant is really going to change the narrative surrounding his contract and his presence and everything about this team, about his role on this team, he's going to have to come up big and clutch in key moments. And when I'm seeing him, and this is just from watching him as a Rockies player. I watched him when he played the Rockies, but I didn't watch a ton of the Cubs, so I don't know how he looked and things there. But I'm just seeing a guy that doesn't seem fully confident in himself and comfortable with himself right now. I'm seeing a guy that looks like he's in just not, I don't know. The best way to describe it is out of place, but I don't necessarily know if that's a fair categorization, but that is the case. I mean, he's a guy that was a huge free agent name that most people are forgetting that he's on this team because he hasn't been able to stay on the field. And I think that's a massive problem. Kris Bryant coming to the Rockies should have been a moment that really changed the free agency outlook for the Colorado Rockies and really should change the approach of the Rockies in free agency. Now it just appears like the Rockies were hyper fixated on a guy and ignored all of the issues and concerns with this player, because the trends are only downward right now for Kris Bryant, at least in a sense his time in purple. And there hasn't been enough moments to really, really, really feel like he is rebounding not only himself, but helping this team rebound, helping this team get better. Unfortunately for the Rockies, the Kris Bryant experience has only been associated with lots of losing, with lots of bad health, with lots of bad luck, sure, but these are some, I mean, things start to just stack up, and things start to, as this Kris Bryant situation continues to snowball downhill, there's going to have to be some really tough questions asked and answered sooner rather than later with this Rockies team, especially because the trade value only goes down further and further, especially with the money and the contract. And the concerns over his performance aren't really, you can't really confidently feel like they're going to be addressed until midway through the season next year. I mean, I need to see Kris Bryant play 3 months in a row of healthy baseball. I need to know that Kris Bryant can play a month of ball without going down. Because how can you build up any confidence? How can the players around you build up confidence on the field confidence with you if you're unable to do so and unable to help your team win? And yes, his veteran leadership and his guidance and his experience all matter. And it is a great resource for these young guys. But when we look at the numbers, when we look at Kris Bryant, we didn't expect this. We didn't expect Kris Bryant to be a negative WAR player, -1 WAR and 300 at-bats, 233 average. I'm encouraged. The thing that was slightly encouraging was the fact that he finished in double-digit home runs. But all of his numbers compared to his career, and when you look at the paces and the trajectory, and you look at everything, he's just down across the board. He looks really far from being the 4-time All-Star MVP and Rookie of the Year. On the flip side of all of this, if Kris Bryant turns it around, and Kris Bryant is someone that is leading the Rockies in offensive categories next year, and is someone that is contributing, that he has shown that he is able to contribute, and how he has contributed to teams that he's played for in the past, that'll be a key reason why the Rockies win those games they lost this year and win the games that they lost the year prior. Kris Bryant has shown in his career that he is someone that can drastically alter the outcome of a game. He just hasn't done that for the Rockies yet. I just don't have a signature Kris Bryant moment burned into my brain. And this is an MVP. This is a guy that was highly regarded. This was a guy considered to be one of the biggest gets in free agency. So for me, the only way to start feeling more confident and better in this is if Kris Bryant really starts dominating in 2024. Doesn't even have to be like league-wide domination. I'm just saying dominating in the way that it's impacting the game and he is a factor. And dominating is not the right word. So we're contributing. Thank you. Dominating isn't the right word. Let me use contributing. If he's contributing to the Rockies are going to win more games. I know that's not that crazy of a thing to say, but he's supposed to be that player, that X factor. They called him aircraft carrier, whatever. He's supposed to be that guy. And if he's able to become a version of that guy or a closer version to his past self, the Rockies offense is going to improve and first base is going to work out fine for him. With the way the Rockies are looking, the outfield is pretty set up. You don't need Kris Bryant out there. You don't need Kris Bryant to play third base. You can rotate with Montero. You have to be careful with how you do it. You have to make sure you're handling Montero the right way, and you're really increasing the questions around Michael Toglia. But if Kris Bryant is able to contribute, the spot is there. How long do we give Kris Bryant the spot, though? When does Kris Bryant sneak into overpaid DH territory? I mean, because that might be coming sooner rather than later if the health issues continue. But the Rockies getting closer and back to the playoffs, when you're looking at that, what's got to change, what's got to get better, who's got to improve, at the top of the list. At the top of the list of players that need to do more for this team. Arguably number one on this list is Kris Bryant. I mean, maybe Austin Gomber or John Gray, or not John Gray. I wish John Gray or Kyle Freeland could maybe go with that. I don't think so, though. We know what John Gray and Austin, we've understood or have a better understanding of Gray and Gomber. God, why do I keep saying Gray? I got Texas on the brain because of the World Series and the playoffs and everything like that with Freeland and Gomber. But for Bryant, we're sitting here asking, where's the MVP? Where is this game changer? Where is this guy that this club believes so much in, especially in the contexts of the moves that this team made leading up to the Kris Bryant deal? Plain and simple, a better 2024 comes for the Rockies if it's a better 2024 for Kris Bryant. Want to put a bow on our Kris Bryant conversation for today, read a little bit more here from Purple Row, and look ahead to our next Rockies review coming up here in segment number 3 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies. But before we do that, got to tell you about our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel's got you covered throughout the rest of the baseball postseason and football season with America's #1 sportsbook. You can make your postseason debut with FanDuel. Join FanDuel today and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to create your new account. Then you can get in on the action from the first pitch until the final out. Bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. And if you don't want to wait the whole game to get a W, predict what will happen in the next at-bat with quick bets. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast for free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel here on the interwebs. I wanted to read a little bit more here as we close out our thoughts on Kris Bryant, who arguably is one of the most, if not the most important Rockies player that in need of a bounce back next year for 2024. We are reading from Purple Rose ranking the Rockies here from Mac Wilcox. Kris Bryant's contract is officially an albatross. Bryant's situation in particular is compounded by the uncertainty of his primary position. Assumed to be the primary left fielder for the future, that now is come into question by the rise of young superstar Nolan Jones. KB ended up playing the majority of his games in right field, but as the Rockies look to get more out of players such as Sean Bouchard and Michael Toglia, as well as the phenom Zach Veen waiting in the wings in Colorado's minor league system, they transitioned Bryant to more first base time as season ends. Even that seems only a temporary solution, as Colorado will have to balance out time between Bryant and seemingly first base and basement incumbent Eleris Montero. Things are only going to get more complicated as Colorado juggles all of these talents, and it may force the team to part ways with one or multiple of those aforementioned players. Bryant, of course, will not be moving, not with that huge contract. Instead, Colorado will just have to hope that he can somehow find the fire and the ability to return to what he was with the Chicago Cubs. This contract has already garnered comparison to the unfavorable deals like those of Mike Hampton and Ian Desmond. Let's see. Bryant's holds the highest WAR of these signings at negative 0.5, followed by Desmond's at negative 1.1 and Hampton's negative 1.6. So the writing's on the wall here. I mean, there is nothing. I mean, this is it. This year, 2024, is a prove it year for Kris Bryant and a prove it year for the organization. Because just because of the contract and everything, how long are you going to give Kris Bryant opportunities, and how much are you willing to part with in favor of playing Kris Bryant more and more? What does he have to do? What does he have to do to make you feel fully confident that the best way to help this Rockies team win a championship, make the playoffs, win a division, play above 500 baseball is to consistently go with Kris Bryant? What does that look like? Does he have to play MVP caliber ball, all-star caliber ball, positive WAR ball, versus potential prospects, versus young guys that need more time? In Tolia's case, I mean, Montero is facing some similar situations here, I think. But you really got to pivot from some of these young guys. Then you block a lot of things. You change the trajectory of some of the careers of other players and their roles within your organizations with moving this guy to 3 different positions. So above all, and everything, how much do you really buy into Kris Bryant outside of the contract that you already have given him? When do you start stashing him as just the DH and letting Charlie play more outfield and letting the young guys do that? Or do you have to rest Kris Bryant more frequently? Does Kris Bryant not play full weeks of ball next year? The unfortunate biggest nature of this contract and this commitment and this deal and everything now is just, now what? As the middle of this season occurs and we're in the halfway point of this Bryant contract, and if he can't stay healthy, or if he's still not hitting the ball that well, and you're having him play first base, which it's not going to be rocket science for someone like him, but Tolia is stuck in AAA because of it. You've really locked yourself into a tough spot here if you're the Colorado Rockies. Because as much as the Rockies need Kris Bryant to contribute and be someone that can help out this team, they can't afford to continue to trot him out and be miserable. That's just not where the Rockies are at right now, especially with that position. You have other players at different levels that could benefit more than a struggling Kris Bryant. Kris Bryant deserves his opportunity. He's the veteran, and we know deserves his chance, his opportunity to start next year off and show people that he can still be the contributor and be the player that he can be. But we can't sit here and ignore that this issue, that Kris Bryant, the questions are only growing, not the confidence. And that's the exact opposite of what we need for this team and for this team going forward. This team needs to build up alongside these young guys and build up alongside this foundation that this team believes highly in. Or they need to be more willing to pull the cord and be more aggressive. I mean, if it's one thing from the trade deadline this past year, with the amount of veterans on expiring contracts the Rockies were able to trade. That was we've praised that, and it was a good move. We get that. But now if you're the Rockies and you're heading into the trade deadline this coming season, you're looking at trading prospects, younger guys, or guys that you haven't really given a ton of consistent time to. And that impacts your process. All because you have to work around Kris Bryant. So as much as we've talked about steps forward for all of these young guys, we need to see Kris Bryant start taking his first steps forward, his second step forward, third, fourth, and so on. 2024 has to be a year where Kris Bryant not only contributes, but impresses. Or else the situation is only going to get more confounded and convoluted. And it's only going to get messier as the Rockies navigate a big contract and a veteran player that isn't contributing. And it certainly isn't the first time they've had to deal with it. And it certainly isn't the first time they've had to deal with it at first base. So what's our Kris Bryant review? I need to see so much more. And the questions are only growing around Kris Bryant because my confidence in him is at an all-time low since his time in purple. But if we're looking for optimism, a bounce-back season for Kris Bryant and positive contributions from Kris Bryant means the Rockies are going to win more of those close games and will win more games in 2024. Folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for joining us and making us your first listen of the day. We really, really do appreciate that. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming services. We are free on those streaming services as well. And we're also on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel where you can find the video portions of the podcast and all that good stuff. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Now go make Locked On MLB your second listen of the day, or stay up to date with all things Colorado sports with the Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, and Locked On Buffs podcasts, all available on the Locked On Podcast Network. Folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.